Hi, I'm here with Tom Rigg, CEO of B4RN, Broadband for the Rural North, who I interviewed a while back on my YouTube channel. Here again for an update. So, Tom.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, great to have you. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
So, since last time we spoke,
Yeah.
what's been going on up at B4RN?
Well, I mean, we've been building. Okay, so we've been looking at, all the different project areas that we're looking at before. We've had, different scope that's coming our way. It's all really deep rural. Okay, that's the thing that's the real concentration at the minute, is finding a solution to try and get to everyone. Okay, this 99% that we're really, really going for at the minute. And, we're part of the solution. A lot of the other altnets, obviously, big part of the solution. But I think the concentration is on that last little piece of how we're actually going to reach that one step further. There's a lot of conversation about other technologies, low Earth orbit or 5G, but fixed fibre, we still see it as the ultimate solution, and we're doing what we absolutely can to use, the public subsidy and private investment and community investment the best way we can to reach that person that needs it, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we've been doing. We've been busy really trying to focus on reaching those people.
Yeah, and I totally agree about the 5G and the low Earth orbit.
Okay, yeah.
I think there is a place, but full fibre is the ultimate.
Yeah.
It's the fastest, it's the most reliable,
Yeah.
and actually it's the most economic. Once you've got it in,
Yes.
it's the most economic.
It is, absolutely. It's a long-term investment. You get your fibre in, and we're trying to reach as many people as possible, and that gets you exposure to a larger, customer base who are, especially in the deep rural, are very interested in trying to get connected. They're going from zero to everything in the places that we're working in, right? Despite, the 5G coverage or the 4G coverage that might be creeping up in the areas, they're still going from, that sort of basic level of connectivity to having, well, with us, it's a gigabit, right? So that's the sort of default package that we've got, symmetrical gigabit. And so they're going from zero to getting that.
Yeah.
So, we've got other efforts in, there's been a lot of conversation at this event around digital inclusion, connecting communities, all that sort of thing. I mean, we've been living that since we began. And it's heightened recently in that I think the technology is far outpacing the ability for us as humans to understand it and engage with it and use it, right? So that's something else we're doing as we're going out and building, is looking at how we can get all these people to understand, well, what is this thing that's coming? How can I use it? And then once you do that, they're going to want it even more.
Yeah.
So that's the type of that's where we're working and we're operating right now. It's quite an exciting time.
Yeah, and where are you building then exactly? Which
Predominantly in the north.
Benefiting?
Okay, yeah, predominantly in the north of England. We've got projects in Cumbria, in Lancashire, in Northumberland. That's a big concentration of build at the minute. And there was mention of, sort of 5G innovation region, connectivity going on in Kielder Forest, for example. Well, we're also putting fibre into Kielder Forest. Okay, so these places are very, very remote, on the borders. So that's where we're working at the moment. Predominantly in the north of England.
And what's the rate of build? I remember when we spoke last time, I think were you talking about 1,000 a year or something? Or have I made that up?
No, it's around that figure. I mean, that was, connected, between 1,000, 2,000 connected every year. We RFS more than that. Our average take-up rate is 53%. So we're sort of almost, doubling up on the amount of fibre that's going out and going to these places. But as I said last time, our pace of build is set by the communities that we're going to and the difficulty of it, right? So we could go for something a little easier, for example, and try and do a bit more of a commercial build or something like that. But a lot of other altnets have got that.
Yeah.
They're really doing it, and you reported on it today. They're doing it at a furious pace, okay? So if we just concentrate on that really, really hard to reach stuff, it takes longer. And yes, we've chosen to dig it for the most part. We're going to dig it. Inevitably, that takes longer. But another comment that's been common theme here is everybody's concentrating on their operating models, their revenues, their income, and a lot of conversation about being EBITDA positive.
Yeah.
Okay, we were there back then, right? And what we're really trying to do is just use the funds wisely to go and get to these, far-reaching places now. So rate of build, still very similar, but we're okay with that.
Yeah, and where are you in terms of RFS now, and where do you think you might end up in terms of the build, or is it just a case of you'll keep doing what you're doing,
keep doing
as
what
long
you're
as
doing?
you can?
No, ultimately, I think what the best place we can work is slotting ourselves into where all the gaps are in these deep rural places. Now, we're not obviously going to be there for one property that's 100 miles from our network.
Yeah.
That's not really viable at all. But there are still a lot of properties that don't have a solution yet, which we could be part of to go and collect them, if you like. So we're just going to keep going as long as it makes sense for those communities that we're going to. At some point, as you quite rightly pointed out, the UK will have fibre to 99 point whatever percent, and largely the job is done. And then it's figuring out, well, what do we do for these others?
Yeah.
But we'll keep going as long as as long as we need to.
But network today, what's the size of your network today?
Yeah, absolutely fine. I mean, we cover roughly 30,000 RFS.
Yeah.
Okay. And these new areas will bring another several thousand on board. We could end up with maybe 40, 50,000 RFS total, but who knows? Because we don't know what the rate of build is going to be, what's going to be left, what we can pick up, but we're going to be there slotting ourselves in.
What are your thoughts about wholesale? Because at the moment, you're vertically integrated.
We are.
That's the business model.
Yes.
And you are using public funding there. I think
Yes.
there is some obligation for wholesale. Or
Not
is there
the scheme that we're engaged with. So we're part of the gigabit voucher scheme, which is a demand-led intervention, which doesn't have the wholesale requirement attached to it. Because what we're doing essentially is building very, very long lines to very rural places. Trying to insert additional ducting or fibre capacity is absolutely impossible, due to the distances that we're running this stuff. It just economically does not make sense. So they're the main reasons why we don't have that additional space to then offer up as wholesale. But we are keeping our ear to the ground on what the market is doing in terms of, well, what do the people want? At the moment, the people attached to Barn as a brand, and that's in the service. I mean, the infrastructure, obviously, but it's underground. Nobody rarely sees it. Once it's done, it's hidden away. So how do people attach to Barn? Well, it's in the service that they get.
Yeah.
So that's why we find that very important today to sell our service to those communities. But, we keep an open mind about all of this. If the industry goes a certain way and it makes perfect sense to try and do something with that, then maybe it goes both ways. We could sell our service over others' network because people love the Barn brand. Or it could be that we have somebody else come onto our network because we see an opportunity for that other 50% that's not signed up yet.
Yeah.
It's an open book right now. We don't, at the moment, we're very, very much liking that the communities love what Barn do. They stand for the values that we have, and why we exist and what we're doing, and so they buy into that.
Yeah.
So that's our huge hook.
So to do hypothetically, to do a wholesale deal with an ISP like Zen, you'd be looking at let's say, round about 15,000 of the 30,000 RFS that you've not yet signed up, and you'd have to think, well, if we do a deal with this ISP on a wholesale level, we might get another 5,000 of those 15,000 signed up.
Maybe. Yeah, exactly.
That sort of
business exactly. And that's the positive outcome of all of that. A possible negative outcome is, well, if they see somebody else across the network, this is a community network.
Yeah.
All right. So I know you don't work for profit. You work for people. You work for environment. I totally stand for that as well. But if they see that somebody's making a profit off this network that they've painstakingly put into the ground, how are they going to feel?
Yeah.
Right. So there's all these sort of swings and roundabouts to think about. But no, we'll see where the market goes with it. But right now, we know what works is the Barn brand in these regional, community areas.
Well, I really love Barn as a company. I think the whole community interest company is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And I could go on about my views about the evils of capitalism and all that. And I think, Barn is an excellent model that goes against that grain.
Yeah.
So you're doing your own thing.
We are.
Actually really making a difference to those rural communities. But let's talk about the industry as a whole now. You're in the industry.
Yep.
you're looking at everything that's going on, the various talks about consolidation, the deals, the fundraisers.
Yep.
So give me some insight on where you think the industry as a whole is,
Okay.
where you think it might end up going.
Okay. No, it's yeah. How long have you got? No, ultimately, I think that, by and large, what you've said earlier rings true in that raising funds is very difficult these days because what people have seen is, here's a business plan, this is what we're going to do, but the investors hadn't quite clocked that it was, overlaying, the delivery timescales might not have been exactly there. I mean, I'm not, trying to criticize anybody's business plan here, but I think by and large, that's what they were buying into. And the reality is something else. Yeah. And so now people trying to invest into altnets, they're very, very cautious and they're wanting a lot more sort of surety on what are we actually going to get, when are we going to get that money back, what is your operating model, and how is that all going to work. And I think, the guys that are consolidating right now and merging, they're doing that at a furious pace as well, really. I know we haven't seen lots and lots of mergers, but there must be conversations in the background.
Oh, I think everyone's talking to everybody.
Of course, they've got to be, right? They've got to be doing that. So I think where we're going to end up is, a few key players on a very sort of standardized platform. You see DOCSIS turning into fibre. You see lots of people turning to fibre as the solution. So I think the next few years is going to be, everybody's going to be madly building. They're going to be joining up these companies that make sense at the time, and we're going to end up with a few big players, I think. Bolted onto that, I think you're going to get other providers where there is a little bit of a niche and it fits perfectly into the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
That's my view on it.
Yeah.
I think you're going to get that. I don't think you're going to get sort of a national operator that's got absolutely everybody on.
Right.
Do you see that as a reality?
I think long term, I do see all of it consolidating now, a bit like the cable companies.
Right, okay, yeah.
And it took a while, but it all ended up collapsing from the 90s when there were all the regional cable companies, all ended up as the MO2 in the end.
Yeah.
And I do think that long term, and I mean into the 2030s,
sure,
we'll end up with, it will join together, and then into the 30s, there might be like two big players left,
right,
and some other ones, like yourselves, and then there'll be pressure, and then one day there'll be announcement. These two big players have finally struck a deal,
and
it's it with the
years later, it's
with the CMA, and will they approve it or will they not?
Okay.
And they probably will, and then it'll happen. But I think that is a much longer term thing. In the near term, it's a bit up in the air. I mean, you've got Jeremy Chalot, CEO of Netomnia, saying that it's going to be either Netomnia, Nexfibre VMO2, or CityFibre being the one that aggregates everyone. I don't know if you've got a view on his comment on whether it's going to be one of those three.
I mean, Jeremy is woomph, right? He knows exactly what he wants, and he's going for it, right? I mean, every respect to the guy. But yeah, I don't know which way it's going to go. I think it's so complicated with the way everybody's running their businesses, what their investments are, how do those models all come together? It's going to take time. I don't think there's a click your fingers moment. Jeremy might like that, to say, right, come on, let's go, we're on. I just don't see that happening. I think it's going to be a sort of a longer, drawn-out thing, which Jeremy's going to get frustrated with, but it's going to be there for a little while before we get, something really coming together. Yeah. Do you not think?
I think it's very up in the air. And I couldn't call it one way or another. I think the consolidation will happen for sure. More deals will happen, but how it will all pan out, how the chess game will play out, very difficult to say.
Absolutely. But one thing's for certain, though, in my view, because of course I'm going to say this, is that, Barnes' model as a community benefit society is, deeply rooted into the communities we've got.
Yeah.
And let's say, Clive does build absolutely everywhere with the fibre.
Yeah.
I do still see that there will be, that hook of those communities wanting to support local, because there will be other things that we will be doing to support those communities, which is it's like a very, very close loop, a feedback loop, if you like, and the funds come back into those communities. That's the way we want to operate, or where we do operate. I do still see that there's a market for that, and we'll be there.
Yes, and I did challenge Openreach on this. We will build everywhere.
Okay, yeah.
And my challenge was, when you say we will build everywhere, do you mean absolutely everywhere, absolutely the last dwelling, the last business? And the response was more like they're still driven by commercials.
Sure.
So when they say everywhere, I mean everywhere. I think it's fine to say everywhere and mean 98%.
Yeah.
99%.
Yeah.
Well, if everywhere does mean 98, let's say everywhere means 98%.
Yeah, sure.
Then Barn can have a...
We're in the last 1%.
You can be in the last 1% and have a sustainable business forever.
Yeah.
And that actually balances really well. And
Yeah.
actually, Openreach might never want to build to those remote locations because of all the very peculiar and bespoke build things that you experience all the time. And you're really good at.
It's challenging terrain. We're dealing with some really, really difficult geography for 2 farms, right? But with the help of the community and how we can go about going, well, you go this way or that way, you tackle it this way or whatever else it is, they all come together and we find a solution and we go and do it. But it's really hard for a national operator to kind of work at that level.
Yeah.
Can you imagine them coming out and being like, right, come on, farmer, whatever name, how are we going to do this? We're going to this way, that way. Oh, we need to quickly go and do this as a solution. Okay, yes, let's go and do that immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't compute with, having huge national standards of how you want to do things, I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there you go.
Yeah, and I think,
we'll fit in. I do see us fitting in.
And look, Openreach's strategy, and again, they've been quite open about this, is because it is a volume game for them.
Yep.
They want to continue their build of 1.1 million a quarter.
Yep.
And if anything, even ratchet that up a
Yep.
little bit more.
Yep.
They are, and they will, and they are going at the easiest pickings first.
Yeah.
So what you've just described is going to be right at the back of the queue of stuff that they want to deploy. 15,000 people, but it's still a limited resource.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at the moment I see it knitting in very well. As in what Openreach are doing today in the areas that they're building, it's the complete opposite to what we're doing. Yeah. So basically what you're getting is 2 suppliers building fibre to people who haven't got it in 2 very different areas.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about urban city builds here. I'm talking about the rural market towns and things like that. Openreach are building in the bigger market towns. Absolutely fine by us because we're building on the hills and they're building in the market towns. Yeah. Actually today it's knitting together quite well.
Yeah, good.
Right? There you go.
Long may that continue.
Let's hope so.
Fantastic. Tom, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Great to chat.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for watching.